Good evening. I am Arati Kumari. I'm a law student at Jindal Global Law School.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jyoteshwar Singh. I'm a student of BE Economics studying at Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. And we are your student anchors for today. We welcome all of you on behalf of the Center for Foreign Languages to the 6th online guest lecture series on German women's writing, which is being organized in collaboration with the German Academic Exchange Service.
Today's lecture revolves around the work of Elfriede Jelinek, a highly regarded Austrian writer, playwright, and novelist who's best known for provocative and challenging works that explore themes of power, gender, and sexuality. Jelinek was born on October 20th, 1946 in Austria and has published numerous novels, plays, and essays throughout her career. Jelinek has received numerous awards and honors throughout her career, including the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2004. Her work continues to be widely studied and celebrated by scholars and readers around the world. The Piano Teacher is one of Jelinek's well-known novels that was also later adapted into a film by the director Michael Haneke. Jyots, how did you find the novel?
Well, Ashwath, truly speaking, I was baffled after reading the novel. I was shocked and disturbed. In the novel, Jelinek explores the life of Erika Kuhl, a piano teacher at a music conservatory in Vienna. Erika is a highly educated and skilled pianist, but she leads a repressed and isolated life, haunted by her overbearing mother and her repressed sexual desires. As the story unfolds, Erika becomes involved in a pervasive and abusive relationship with one of her students, Walter Klemmer. The two engage in a destructive game of domination and submission, driven by Erika's desire for control and Walter's desire for validation. Throughout the novel, Jelinek exposes the dark and disturbing underbelly of Viennese society, exploring themes of sexual violence, repression, and power dynamics. The Piano Teacher is a provocative and challenging work that delves into the complexities of human relationships and the destructive consequences of repressed desires. The character of Erika Kohut was really difficult to understand. She is emotionally and sexually repressed due to her past trauma, leading to a desire of self-harm and masochistic behavior. Her sexuality is portrayed graphically and unsettlingly, exploring societal expectations and power dynamics. Erika's emotional detachment leads to an unhealthy and destructive relationship with her piano student, Walter. I really look forward to be able to understand the novel better and with the help of our esteemed experts.
Yes, me too. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed chair, Dr. Milind Brahme, who's an associate professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Madras. Dr. Brahme has completed his PhD in German from the Center of German Studies, JNU, and has established himself as an expert in his field. Dr. Brahme's research and teaching focuses on a variety of areas, including German language and literature, literary theory, pedagogy, and sociology of education. His recent publications on topics such as environment education in Indian schools, foreign language studies in India, and inclusive education in India reflect his commitment to advancing education in India and his dedication to exploring new perspectives and insight. Dr. Brahme also wrote the introduction to the English version of Jelinek's Wood, Fury, published by Seagull Books in 2022. We are honored to have Dr. Brahme as our chair for this guest lecture and look forward to his insights and guidance throughout the event. Now, I'd like to hand over the virtual mic to Dr. Brahme.
Thank you, Ashwath, for that very kind introduction, which I take with a pinch of salt. Okay. I'm very glad to be here. Shruti, thank you for doing this the lecture series. And I'm very much looking forward myself to listening to Arati. Shruti, you told me that the students have read the Klavierspielerin, and also Jyots and Ashwath's introduction also gave us a kind of an idea that they're familiar with the story, quote unquote, of the novel. I just wanted to know whether within a few minutes, I'll just say something about Jelinek in the sense contextualizing her work a little bit from our encounter with Jelinek for the past few years. And if you to allow me for not more than 5 minutes, I'll just say something about kind of placing Jelinek in a larger context of Austrian-German literature. So I think the introduction to Jelinek already Ashwath has given us about the fact that she's now 76 and lives in Austria, has won the Nobel Prize in 2004, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to talk a little bit about her theater and then her writing. So Jelinek's first play, which which was titled Was geschah nachdem Nora ihren Mann verlassen hatte, or What Happened After Nora Left Her Husband. It was written in 1979 and quote, as a reflection upon the centennial of Henrik Ibsen's A Doll's House. And it is a deconstruction of its idealistic implications, the heroic strength of the heroine in Doll's House, and the utopian hopes for the equality in the partnership of a married couple. That is what is portrayed by, it's a deconstruction of this in Jelinek already in 1979. This play already reflects a language skepticism that is at the heart of so much of Austrian writing. And I think Jelinek's use of language also, even though we read it in translation, I think it should be clear that there is a very, very self-reflexive use of language in Jelinek. In Nora, in her Nora, the post-revolution disillusionment reveals the degeneration of revolutionary ideas into shallow and hollow slogans, into cliches. And I think the work with the cliche, employing the cliche in order to deconstruct the cliche and its very, very highly subjugative power over us, over society, is also a feature of her writing. And I would look at Jelinek's writing in a kaleidoscope as a student of German literature with Brecht's Verfremdungseffekt, or the alienation effect in Brecht's theater, or Öden von Horvath's Demaskierung des Bewusstseins, or unmasking of human consciousness. And also, by her own admission, Jelinek also credits Heiner Müller and his post-dramatic theater as being quite influential, quote unquote, influential in her work as well. But one feature of Jelinek's writing or theater texts is that her texts allow the reader to experience a literariness, which is quite independent of the performative aspect of theater itself. Okay, so one can even read her texts. This is a quote, according to Jelinek, in a society dominated by crude materialism and the predatory pursuit of success, personal self-realization is the ultimate fiction. Nora's conditioning as consumer of her own myth is perfected to the point where individual identity is indistinguishable from societal role. Thus, any attempt on Nora's part to change her life by slamming shut the door to the doll's house is sabotage from the outset, because it is conceptualized from within the power framework Nora tries to escape, refracted in Jelinek's version in the many societies she encounters as she proceeds from mill worker to a capitalist's mistress and back to the entrapment of the doll's house. This is, again, I mean, the framework within which problems emerge and solutions are searched is itself a very, very important feature of Jelinek's writing. The Feminist Encyclopedia of German Literature, compiled in 1997, has the following to say about Jelinek's work. She has three major and interrelated targets in her writing: what she views as capitalist consumer society and its commodification of all human beings and relationships, what she views as the remnants of Austria's fascist past in public and private life, and what she views as the systematic exploitation and oppression of women in a capitalist patriarchal society. This as a background to all her writing, but particularly her early writing, and also her own past as a disillusioned, if I may say, member of the Communist Party of Austria. So I begun this introduction to today's session with Jelinek, the playwright, and today's speaker, Dr. Arati Kumari, has done her PhD on Jelinek's theater, calling it very interestingly an other theater, or a theater of the perpetual other. And I'm aware that Arati is today speaking on one of Jelinek's most well-known novels, which is Die Klavierspielerin, or The Piano Teacher. But the author herself, however, has indicated more than once that she wants her writing to be read as much as performed on stage. And in that sense, there is a quality of writing that runs through everything she has written and writes. Wordplay and humor. About humor and wordplay, she says in an interview, and I quote, "never hold back." Okay. Wordplay and humor are very important to her to expose the cliche and the subjugating power of society. In an insightful interview with her authorized English translator, Gita Honegger, Jelinek talks about her own desire that her theater texts get read. And I'm quoting Jelinek here. "But I also want my plays to exist as complete texts and that they get read. But that has not happened. Because for the reading audience, those are still plays, and plays are hardly read by the general reading audience. But my plays are texts, basically like novels. Just that the ones are texts for speaking, the others for reading. And that's the only difference. The methods are the same." Unquote. So Jelinek, the writer, has always also considered herself as an outsider, and not with any kind of self-pity. But the outsiderness becomes for Jelinek a distinct advantage, a vantage point for her own writing. And I'm quoting her again. "I've always been an outsider already as a child, and only through writing did I realize later that this is the position from where one sees things the clearest. The ongoings in an anthill can only be seen if one distances oneself from it rather than sticking one's nose into it. The stranger, the foreigner, often sees more than the native, who might be too deeply rooted in the ground. And from the distance, it is also possible to move figures around like a god and arrange them in any experimental configuration that comes to mind." This is also an important feature of Jelinek's writing, that she likes to play with her figures and has complete control over them. So how does Jelinek, the Viennese insider-outsider, look at and simultaneously portray the life of a middling Klavierspieler in Vienna? Theodor Adorno has said, "One must have tradition in oneself to hate it properly." Is this a key to the piano teacher? I mean, we all know that Jelinek herself also was a trained pianist and went to the conservatory in Vienna. And apart from that, how is Arati herself? I mean, this is important for me also. How is Arati herself going to read Jelinek's reading of a woman's life? Because Jelinek's texts allow for, or in fact, call for a reading on the reader's terms. I mean, she even about her theater text, she says that I have written it. Now it is up to the director to do whatever they want with it. I'm not concerned with it. Okay, I have written it. So it demands, in fact, a reading on the reader's own terms. So how is Arati going to do it? I'm very keen. So let us listen to Arati's presentation today, which is titled Exploration of Aesthetic Organization in Jelinek's The Piano Teacher. Arati intends to read it as a Künstlerroman. Is it called an art novel or artist novel? I'm not sure. A kind of Bildungs- and Anti-Bildungsroman, looking at the evolution and aesthetics of the piano as much as that of the eponymous protagonist of the novel. So over to you, Arati.
Thank you very much, Milind. In fact, I would like to start thanking right from Shruti for organizing this.
Sorry, I have to introduce Arati, which is something that I forgot. I'm really sorry about that.
But it was enough. You said I did PhD on
No. So Dr. Arati Kumari. Dr. Arati Kumari currently works as assistant professor of German at the Vellore Institute of Technology in Vellore. And she has studied Germanistic at the JNU, New Delhi. Her PhD is titled In Search of Another Theater with Elfriede Jelinek, and she did it at the Center of German Studies in JNU. She has previously taught German language at Pondicherry University from 2010 to 2020. She's a recipient of the German Academic Exchange Program Exchange Service Scholarship as part of the PhD program at the Free University in Berlin from October 2007 to December 2008. Her research interests are drama, theater, theater practice, performance studies, gender and sexuality, literature on anti-Semitism, sports sociology, intermedia studies, and eco-humanism. And now over to you, Arati.
Thank you so much, Milind. Okay, first of all, Shruti, thanks a lot for organizing this interesting series. I'm very happy to be part of it, and I have been listening to each and every lecture since it started until today. I hope I do justice to it in my presentation today. And Jyotish and Ashwath, it was very nice the way both of you related to the novel and how you presented it. So it really makes a nice warm start. And it's very interesting how Professor Milind Brahme, he emphasizes on the literariness and on the reading of the text. And it's very interesting how he says that it's Jelinek looks for it, that the reader reads her text on her own term. So there is a lot of autonomy that I don't know if I can say liberty a reader can take. The space is there that can be used to read her text in various ways. Yeah. So like I have read this novel as a artist's novel, like Künstlerroman. So I will share my, as you can see, the title of my presentation is Exploration of Aesthetics. Aesthetic Organization in Elfriede Jelinek's The Piano Teacher. It was her novel. It was her this particular novel, The Piano Teacher, published in 1983, which brought international attention to Jelinek's literary works. Elfriede Jelinek has been experimenting both with content as well as with form in her literary writings. So I will be quoting here from Joanna Spielmann, who talks about Jelinek's writing style in these words. Elfriede Jelinek engages subversively with established cultural values and prevalent political forms, whilst holding on firmly to antagonistic fantasies as concepts of aesthetic radicalism. So the engagement with the novel, The Piano Teacher, under discussion here, aims to bring forth how Jelinek subverts the high Viennese culture in which classical music dominates by bringing in antagonistic views, perspectives, fantasies about life and music, sports and sexuality, class and gender through the story of the piano teacher, which, as Spielmann says, can be termed as aesthetic radicalism. The novel was processed as one-act opera by Patricia Junger in 1988. And in 2001, Michael Haneke adopted the novel as a film titled La Pianiste. So, and then in 2018, the book also inspired an artist from Sweden, Victoria Troff, to create an expressionistic artwork, which she titled Elfriede Jelinek, the Klavierspielerin. In this work, we see a female pianist with head down on piano and blood gushing down. In my view, it brings forth internal as well as external sides of the pianist's life, this particular pianist's life. I would be interested in knowing how you view this artwork. Now let's have a look at the cover page of the German edition of the novel. We can see here a female body and the piano keys situated between the legs. This could relate to women and piano, women's sexuality and piano, or women's body and piano. One can also see it as the embodiment of piano. Let's move to the next slide. now here we see here we see the piano teacher translated by on the cover page of this translated in English translated book of the piano teacher. We see it has borrowed a still from the movie La Pianista. You see the still picture of the promotion of the movie on the other side. So what is significant here? I wanted to just talk about the title of all three versions, like the original German version, in which the book is called, the novel is called The Klavierspielerin, the piano player. In the English translated version of the book, it is called The Piano Teacher. And the film is titled The Pianist. So what is important here is that the story is centered around piano, or you can see the story is centered around a woman who is a piano player, or maybe a piano teacher, or a pianist. So, in my view, the novel thematizes the evolution of Erika Kohut, the main protagonist of the story, as pianist, piano player, or piano teacher, right from her adolescence to her being adult. And in that sense, it can be perceived, in my view, as Künstlerroman. Künstlerroman, in English, you can translate it loosely as artist's novel. So the questions that arise here, which prompt the reading of the novel as Künstlerroman, are: what is the social history of piano? How have women been relating to it? What role does the female body play in it? How does the piano playing shape the social perception about women and their bodies? And very specifically related to the novel, what kind of relationship Erika has with music, piano? How does it shape her? How does she perceive it? What are her life circumstances that contribute to her becoming a piano player, a piano teacher, or a pianist? So to engage with these questions, the presentation is divided into following parts. You can see here. First part is, I will be briefly talking about Elfriede Jelinek. Second is the storyline of piano teacher. And in the third, we'll talk about the social evolution of piano and women's place in this evolution. Fourth will be about Künstlerroman and its aesthetic. And then we come down to the reading of the novel as Künstlerroman. So let's start with the first part. So here, as we have already got introduction of a little bit introduction about Elfriede Jelinek, I'll just go add up some more. Like, as we already got to know, we know that Elfriede Jelinek was born on October 20, 1946 in Mürzzuschlag, Styria in Austria. Her father was a working class Czechoslovakian Jewish socialist, and her mother was a bourgeois Austrian Catholic. Jelinek grew up mostly in Vienna. She attended the Vienna Conservatory of Music, where she studied organ, piano, and flute, and then majored in art history, theater arts, and music at the University of Vienna, but gave up her studies after 6 terms as she experienced nervous breakdown. Afraid to walk out on the streets alone, trapped at home, Jelinek began to write. Mother played a very important role in Jelinek's life. About the mother's character and Jelinek's relationship with her, Uta Deger writes, the mother was the dominant one, not only in relation to the child, she set the tone, but also in relation to her husband. I'm just reading the German quotes in order to save some time, English quote. So below we have the German one also. So now mother is practical, very pragmatically thinking, strong-willed and action-oriented human being. The father is opposite to that. He survived Nazism during Second World War, because of his utility as a chemist in the state-supported program. Later, post-war, he emerged as unpractical, passive, weak person and emotionally dependent on his wife. He ended up spending last phase of his life in sanatorium. So this is the story, life story of Elfriede Jelinek, briefly, a brief biography of her. Now let's move to the next part. Here we talk about the storyline of the piano teacher that you all have read and you are aware of it, but just to find the connection between her life and the story line in the piano, in the novel, we go through it quickly. So here we have the story about a woman called Erika Kohut, who is in her late 30s now. However, the novel back and forth narrates the story about Erika as a child, as adolescent, and also as an adult. Erika is a professor at conservatory, lives with her mother in an apartment after the father, who showed mental problems, was shifted to a sanatorium. While maintaining her life between work as a piano teacher and living twosome life in the company of her mother, in between, she lives her fantasies by loitering around in a working class area in Vienna. In her music class, she comes in contact with a student, Clemmer, who shows interest in her. In their interaction in the music class and in the course of long conversation between them around the theme of music, Erika confides in him her sexual fantasies through a letter. The conflicting relationship between the two has a catastrophic end, as Clemmer does not abide by the conditions mentioned in the letter, assaults and rapes her brutally. A day after this gruesome incident, mother suggests Erika that she should maybe socialize and mingle with more people. Erika dresses up, goes out with a knife to the engineering college, where Clemmer is laughing and talking, surrounded with young crowd, and then they all leave. Erika stabs herself on shoulder. She bleeds and walks away. That is where the story ends. Mother's domineering presence and father's absence is a common and obvious point of resonance in the stories of the author Elfriede Jelinek and the protagonist of the novel, Erika Kohut. Also common is ambition of Jelinek's mother as well as Erika's mother to see the daughter at the pinnacle of piano career. Elfriede Jelinek, like Erika in the novel, is well versed with music, and after initially writing lyrics and probably few compositions, opts for literary writing. Erika Kohut, the protagonist of the novel, continues to play piano amidst all the conflicts and antagonistic emotions, fantasies, ideas. The novel tells the story of Erika not becoming a great pianist as the mother dreamed of. It takes us through the life stages of the pianist, which attributes to her rebelliousness, her thoughts, her fantasies, and her knowledge in music and in life. With the exception of Clara Schumann, who gave several concerts in Vienna in 1870s before she got married to Robert Schumann, and then her musical journey took the backseat. There is no other woman pianist known in the public domain who performed in concerts. Jelinek wrote a play about Clara Schumann in 1981 and titled it Claras musikalische Tragödie. In this play and also in the novel under discussion here, Jelinek engages with piano in relation to society, dismantles the cult of genius artists, and illustrates how difficult it is for women to realize their creative potential in the art field. Clara Schumann becomes a victim of patriarchy. Erika's path to become a pianist is paved by her mother, who seems to be influenced by the modern aesthetics of 18th century, which divorces itself from the classical notion of aesthetics being rooted in sensory perception. Embodied experiences are rejected by the modern aesthetics. It is important here to engage with the social evolution of piano and its aesthetic development in order to understand the journey of Erika Kohut as a piano player. So we move to the third part, social evolution of piano and women's place in the evolution. So the first pianoforte was built in 1700 in Italy by Bartolomeo Cristofori. In over a century, piano gained immense popularity and became a middle-class instrument. Middle-class girls were learning piano in order to attract a husband. The piano was viewed as an appropriate instrument for women, unlike, say, the flute or cello, due to its association with the motionlessness, considered to be the proper position for women's bodies. Piano symbolized in this period certain kind of middle-class femininity and demonstrated the wealth of the family and also the virtuousness of middle-class girls. So the creativity was never supported and encouraged. Rather, piano learning was a tool to instill middle-class values in a girl. Girls were encouraged to learn piano only up to certain level, and at most they could be assigned up to lead genre, and the demonstration of their piano skill maximum only up to chamber music. According to Larson Powell and Brenda Bethman, we may recall here that if the piano was a symbol of respectable, cultured, middle-class femininity, the female pianist was also suspect to her critics, male critics, should she gain too much skill and venture too far out of domestic music making and into the commercially profitable Öffentlichkeit of the concert hall. Female concert pianists were evaluated according to notions of proper feminine display and skill and often judged harshly if their playing was too masculine. Piano playing could be viewed as both feminine and masculine, leaving representations of the piano and its female players ambiguously gendered. According to the bourgeois norm in the 18th and 19th century, women should not be very expressive in playing piano. Their clothes were such which allowed them very limited movement. Like sewing and embroidery, piano playing by girls was also considered a manual skill. Feminine and masculine attributes were distinctly differently defined. Masculine was considered fresh, energetic, determined, pointed, absolute, and dominant. Feminine was serving, dependent, supple. In the 19th century, with the development of form-oriented, self-referential poetics, music became the model for all other arts. The idealization of music as absolute transcending art gave the composers, who were almost all males, the status of spiritual genius. In order to become spiritual genius, the artist must sublimate. And for that, as Morris notes in his study of Künstlerroman, in the artist novel of the late 19th and early 20th century, the artist is often forced to choose between woman and vocation, and only rarely does he achieve fulfillment as both artist and lover. Most portraits of the artist assume that sexual love and artistic creation are in conflict. So thus piano becomes gendered, middle class on one hand, and disembodied, divorced from sensory experiences on the other hand in this period. In the novel, The Piano Teacher, Erika was supposed to be a spiritual genius in piano, not a domesticated piano player. Can there be an oscillation between these two positions? Or can there be a third position, like in Erika's case, her becoming a piano teacher? These questions will be dealt with in the reading of The Piano Teacher as Künstlerroman. But first we learn a little bit about Künstlerroman and its aesthetics. So a Künstlerroman, artist's novel, which has its origin in German early Romanticism, engages with the life and work of an artist. The artist can be real or fictional. The Künstlerroman overlaps with Bildungsroman, apprentice novel. As like in Bildungsroman, it also shows protagonists' development from childhood to middle or old age. However, unlike Bildungsroman, where the protagonist dreams about being a big artist but settles down for a regular life, in Künstlerroman, the protagonist usually rejects the commonplace life arrogantly. In Künstlerroman, the young artist's self is dominated by question of identity and relationship. The artist often finds himself, herself surrounded by people, societies that she finds to be hostile towards himself or herself. She experiences various social and romantic setbacks and has conflicting sexual experiences that may even shock him. The development of the plot is not necessarily linear, stable, or complete. According to Zarina Maiwandi, a Kunstler Roman has two key features: a young artist figure as the central consciousness and some kind of development from beginning to end. So let's talk a little bit about the aesthetics of the Kunstler Roman. In 18th century, Kunstler Roman and the modern aesthetics emerged in Germany. This was the period of German idealism that replaced the body with the disembodied notion of art. The art was with disembodied notion should work as the middle term between consciousness and the external world. Maiwandi views Kunstler Roman as an extension of the aesthetics and comments that the Kunstler Roman has to do not exclusively with art, but also with the entire range of man's creative relationship with the world. Or put another way, art and creativity have to do with more than only matters of vision, beauty, and solitary reflection. In the Kunstler Roman, the artist protagonist works upon the distance between isolated consciousness and the external world creatively. The Piano Teacher is the story about an artist or failed to be an artist protagonist and her relationship with the world. Erika's consciousness makes the major part of the content of the novel. Her engagement with piano playing can be perceived as a creative act. And there are moments of reflection that the book provides while she is learning, while she is teaching, while she is thinking, which I do try to explore below through different stages of Erika's life. So now we come to the fifth part of this presentation, which is reading of the Piano Teacher as Kunstler Roman. This section is divided into 4 parts. You can see, first is Erika's adolescence, then Erika is a music teacher, then Erika is a piano teacher, and then Erika and Clement. So Erika's adolescence. In the mountains where Erika is vacationing with her mother and grandmother, she must play piano early in the morning with all the windows of the house open so that the wave of classical music breaks through all the openings of the house and then pours down the slopes into the valley. The neighbors will feel as if they were standing right next to the piano. All they have to do is open their mouths and Chopin's warm milk will gush into their throats. And then later, Brahms, that musician of frustrated people, especially women. About Brahms, it is said that while living in Hamburg with his family, parents and siblings, he played piano in brothel. Later, as a musician, he came in touch with Robert and Clara Schumann, and after Robert's death, he settled down in Düsseldorf where the couple lived, and he shared platonic relationship with Clara Schumann. This breaks the notion of artist does not being attached with the world emotionally and dismantles the idea of drawing a sublime line around an artist's life. In contrast, the mother and the grandmother guard on Erika in the mountains so that she does not get distracted. Erika is not supposed to be negatively influenced by a visiting cousin who is all over the places, flirting with girls, doing sports, enjoying the nature. Same time, Erika gathers all her energy, spreads her wing, and then plunges forward towards the keys, which zoom up to her like the earth towards a crashing plane. If she does not reach a note at first swoop, she simply leaves it out, skipping notes, a subtle vendetta against her musically untrained torturers. Gives her a tiny thrill of satisfaction. Because according to Erika, an omission is never noticed by a layman. It is a wrong note that upsets them. It also tells that piano is not Erika's inner call. Erika and her mother are enclosed together in a bell jar. Erika has no history. She is cut off from daily practical life so that she can focus on excelling in piano, like the great composers who lived for music in an alienated environment and created musical pieces that transcend time. Erika goes through struggle, competition, and acquires piano skills by studying and interpreting. However, she differentiates performance from interpretation. Performer does not submit whereas the interpreter submits to the creator's work. In the given circumstances, it seems a piano student can aspire to be either an interpreter or a performer and not a creator. Now let's move to the second part. Erika is a music student. Erika, as a music student, travels in public transport and hurts the people traveling in the streetcars just by swinging around as she carries all her musical instruments which dangle from her body in front and behind. She bangs into people's backs and fronts with her stringed instruments and wind instruments and her heavy musical scores. The creature Erika likes to make negative use of energy, although it does have a choice. Mother offers the selection, a broad spectrum of teats on the udder of the cow, known as music. Erika, after playing piano all afternoon at the conservatory while focusing her mind, wielding her bow, and laughing at pupils who played worse than her, looks forward to the streetcar traveling in the evening. In fact, she waits for the hour when there will be too much rush in the streetcar so that she can hurt more people with her instruments. When she is out of her music school, she ponders on how everybody, Philharmonic audience and also PhD scholars, talks about pains of great composers. Erika is thinking this thought, and thereby she feels she is pushing her way inside in the person of great composers. The PhD is one of the chosen few who know that some things can never be fathomed, no matter how hard you try. But what are explanations? There is no possibility of explaining how such a work could ever have come into being. The same holds true for certain poems, which should not be analyzed either. A mysterious stranger in a coachman's black coat turned up and made the down payment for the requiem. The PhD and others who have seen the Mozart's movie know that the mysterious stranger was Death himself. Requiem, according to dictionary meaning, is a mass at which people honor and pray for their dead. The reference of the mysterious stranger here is in reference to Mozart's Requiem, which has a fascinating story about its composition. On the request of a stranger who turned up at his door in early July 1791, mentioning that he was representing someone who wanted a requiem from Mozart on the condition that he does not seek to learn the identity of his patron, Mozart started the work on this piece. He completed the requiem, managed to sketch the voice parts and the bass lines for the Day of Wrath, but it remained incomplete as Mozart died the same year in December, aged 35. The requiem was completed by one Joseph Eibler and Mozart's pupil Jules Meyer, who had got detailed instruction from Mozart about finishing it. Jules Meyer copied the entire completed score in his own handwriting that made it impossible to determine who wrote what and handed it over to the stranger. In the review of the performance of Mozart's Requiem in London in 2020, it says, Mozart set this liturgical text to music for a patron who had lost his young wife to illness earlier that year. But after his death, his widow, Constanzo, claimed that throughout Mozart's last painful days, he believed he was writing the requiem for his own funeral, and he was. In Erika's view too, she thinks, while referring to a movie on Mozart, that the stranger who approached him for the requiem was Death himself. At this point, as she was pondering on Mozart's last masterpiece, she had to confront the real world in the public transport. Ugly masses of people throng about her uninterruptedly. People are always pushing their way into her field of perception. The music student of middle class piano deals with the working class not according to the musically raised spirit, but with her raised fist. Erika may think of herself as class apart with her own field of perception and musical abilities. However, she fails totally as at an important concert at the Academy of Music that seals her fate. Now she chooses the career of a piano professor at the conservatory. Her joining the conservatory as teacher is termed as difficult task, as she has to face now the stammering freshmen and soulless seniors. So now we come to the third part, Erika as a piano teacher. Erika is sharply defined individual. She is a personality because the mother tells that Erika is special. She is one in a million. So as a piano teacher also, she stands alone against the broad mass of her students, one against all. And she turns the wheel of the ship of art. She draws a line between her and her students through her personality. And yet, when a student asks her about her goal of life, she tells humanity. At that moment, she is summing up Beethoven's Heiligenstadt Testament in her piano lesson for the students. Heiligenstadt Testament by Beethoven is a letter that he wrote to his brothers Karl and Johann at Heiligenstadt on 6th October 1806. An excerpt from the letter is shared here. Oh, ye men who think or say that I am malevolent, stubborn, or misanthropic, how greatly do ye wrong me? You do not know the secret cause of my seeming. From childhood, my heart and mind were disposed to the gentle feelings of goodwill. I was even ever eager to accomplish great deeds, but reflect now that for 6 years I have been a hopeless case, aggravated by senseless physicians, cheated year after year in the hope of improvement, finally compelled to face the prospect of a lasting malady, whose cure will take years or perhaps be impossible. Born with an ardent and lively temperament, even susceptible to the diversions of society, I was compelled early to isolate myself, to live in loneliness. When I at times tried to forget all this, oh, how harshly was I repulsed by the doubly sad experience of my bad hearing. And yet it was impossible for me to say to men, speak louder, shout, for I am deaf. This condition brought him to the verge of despair, and he thought of ending his life, but according to him, it was art that withheld him. He had to produce all that he felt called upon him to produce. Erika keeps herself class apart, reads this letter from a piano genius where he reveals his deafness and state of mind, and in the same breath, she mentions that humanity is her goal. While being amidst soulless seniors and stammering freshmen, she gets the power to draw a limit between the gifted and the ungifted. Selecting and rejecting make up for a lot. After all, she was once treated like a goat and separated from the sheep. Erika's mother tells her never to let her student exceed her in piano playing. Erika has imbibed this in her heart and has in fact developed the instinct to inflict fear on her students through her knowledge and through her position as a teacher. This is the same fear that is handed down to the budding musicians through the work of genius pianists. A member of the Philharmonic audience reads the program notes and is prompted to tell someone else how profoundly his innermost being throbs with the pain of this music. He has read all about it: Beethoven's pain, Mozart's pain, Schumann's pain, Bruckner's pain, Wagner's pain. These pains are now his sole property, and he himself is the owner of the Röschler shoes factory or Kotzler construction material wholesalers. Beethoven manipulates the levers of fear, and these owners make their workers jump fearfully. The pain and fear with which the work of great composers is received, the fear so imbibed by the owner of a particular factory, contributes to the culture of fear at his workplace. The book gives a few instances of the failing health of great pianists, so it dispels the myth of associating health with music. In a conversation with Clemmer, one of her students, she mocks the idea of health being the chief criteria of important music. She argues, the fading of Schumann's life light is the extreme opposite of what the healthy masses mean when they call a tradition healthy and wallow in it luxuriantly. Then she adds that Schumann and Schubert, extremely sick composers, are closest to her bruised heart. In 1833, for the first time, Schumann had severe melancholic depressive episode in which phases of exaltation and delusional ideas of being poisoned recurred, alternating in his mind. After a suicide attempt in 1854, he was admitted at his own request to a mental asylum in Andenish, now in Bonn. There he was diagnosed with psychotic melancholia. 2 years later, at the age of 46, he died of pneumonia without recovering from his mental illness. Erika elaborates on why does she like Schumann and which phase of his life she associates with him. Not the Schumann whose thoughts have all fled him, but the Schumann just before that, a hair's breadth before that. He already has an inkling, down to his finest veins. He takes leave of his conscious life as he enters the chores of angels and demons. Yet he clutches that conscious life one final time, even though he is no longer fully conscious of himself. He yearningly tries to catch the fading echoes. He mourns the loss of the most precious thing, himself. This is the phase in which one knows how great the loss of oneself is before one is utterly abandoned. Erika identifies with this state of losing oneself as she has never been able to attain the freedom to be herself, because Erika the meadow flower, that is how she got her name, Erika. Her pregnant mother had visions of something timid and tender. Then upon seeing the lump of clay that shot out of her body, she promptly began to mold it relentlessly in order to keep it pure and fine. Remove a bit here, a bit there. So she is not her natural self, rather cut fine by her mother to maintain purity, which finds resonance in how Erika segregates herself always from the mass. In a very private chamber concert for voluntary listeners in an old patrician house on the Danube Canal of a Polish family, Erika eyes some of her pupils with a glare that could cut glass, the very glare her mother hurled at her daughter's skull after Erika messed up her big concert. When Erika was younger, she was promised by her mother the shoes that she wished for only in exchange for mastering the Bach. Her innocent wishes, it's a quote also, her innocent from the novel, her innocent wishes change over the years into a destructive greed, a desire to annihilate. To rebel the mother who keeps her away from trying to get close to men, as she thinks it will distract Erika from becoming an esteemed pianist. Erika even at times plays piano only with the purpose of attracting men. Conventionally, women playing piano was considered appealing for men, and yet she fails. In order to have him recognize her as a woman and register her as female in his mental notebook, she plays the piano for him alone during breaks. She is very skillful on the keyboard, but he judges her purely by her terrible ungainliness in daily practical life, the clumsiness with which she cannot trample into his heart. Erika was not trained domestically in piano, though she played few times piano for the sole purpose of attracting men. With such experiences, she changes her mind. She will not entrust the utmost and ultimate edge of her being, the very last bit of herself, to anyone. She wants to keep everything and, if possible, add to it. You are what you have. So from being the person she could be under the domineering presence of her mother in her life, now she chooses to have and let that define her. She has the position of piano teacher. She has wardrobe full of clothes that she likes to possess, even if she is not allowed to use them. Mostly after finishing her day work, Erika goes to the dark side of Vienna to watch the peep show, visit some video parlors to buy some porn videos, spies on couple making love in park, and then while returning home with her taxi, she sees a lecture hall where, as she recalls, She once lectured here on Franz Liszt and his misunderstood work. She spoke in loosely crocheted air stitches, and 2 or 3 times she lectured in a regular knit 2 purl 2 on Beethoven's early sonata. She explained that Beethoven's sonatas, whether late or as in this case early, show no such show so much variety that one has to ask oneself the fundamental question of what the much vilified word sonata really means. Perhaps Beethoven applied the word to entities that are not even sonatas in the strict sense of the term. One has to perceive new laws in this highly dramatic musical form. Often in the sonata, feeling eludes form. In Beethoven, that is not the case. For here, the two go hand in hand. Feeling makes form aware of a hole in the ground and vice versa. So here you can see the image of a crocheted air stitch and below an image of knit 2 purl 2. So Erika's reflection on her lectures about Franz Liszt and Beethoven's music. One about Liszt is simple. The one about Beethoven is complex and dense if we go by the patterns of the crochet and knitting. I would be interested in knowing how you look at it. Erika explained Beethoven's early sonata highly dramatic. And in fact, asks one to find new form to interpret his music, as unlike sonata, where feeling escapes form, but not in Beethoven's sonata. Let us listen to Beethoven's Sonata 1, played by Vladimir, as can see here. The vivid description of a shady part of Vienna gets immersed with Erika's interpretation of Beethoven's early sonatas, which we just listened. Erika does not have much regard for most of the students who enroll for music in the conservatory, as she thinks most of them are pushed by their parents to study music, and she believes many of them will not be able to go beyond certain level. Erika's mixed joys are the good advanced students who make an effort. she can wrest all sorts of things from them. Schubert Sonata, Schumann's Kreisleriana, Beethoven sonatas, those high points in the life of a piano student. Besides Schubert's and Beethoven's sonatas, a particular work by Schumann, who was influenced by Schubert's music and the German poet John Paul Richter's literary work, Kreisleriana, is mentioned here. So it's in italics. So that's and it's a very interesting story. So I'll briefly talk about it here. So Kreisleriana constitutes of 8 fantasy-like pieces, which were inspired by the character of Johannes Kreisler, a musician from the works of E.T.A. Hoffmann. Besides its literary association, Schumann's piece is also a love letter to Clara Wieck in disguise. This piece was created 7 years before their marriage in 1838, as they were having clandestine courtship through letters and music. Besides, this work is also seen as schizophrenic in nature. Florestan and Eusebius, the 2 characters that Schumann created himself, are used in this dramatic creation to indicate at his own contrasting, impulsive, and dreamy sides. So let's listen to this. A snippet of this creation of Schumann. Basically, you can see that where she takes instances of those musical pieces, and those are specially highlighted where there is association with women, or it shows some side, like it connects to the body of the creator. No? So those things are very important in her reflection, in the instances that she gives. Yeah, so that is what I wanted to highlight here. Now let's move to the next part, where it is about Erika and Clemmer. Erika Kohut is a piano teacher. Her student Walter Clemmer started learning piano seriously since he was 16. Now he is 10 years older. In Clemmer's observation, Fraulein Erika consists purely of music. So he talks music with her to express his feelings towards her. On days when she deliberately runs out on him, Clemmer plays the Winterizer on a record player over and over, humming along softly. The next day, he tells his teacher that only Schubert's saddest song cycle can suit the mood I was in yesterday, all because of you, Erika. Something in me trembled with Schubert, who, when he wrote Loneliness, must have trembled just as I did yesterday. We suffered in the same rhythm, so to speak. Schubert and your humble servant. I may be minor and trivial compared with Schubert, but on evenings like yesterday, I come off better than usual in comparison with him. Normally, I'm rather superficial. So Winterreise is a song cycle composed by Schubert based on 24 poems by the German poet Wilhelm Müller. Schubert created this piece as he was dying of syphilis. Müller also died when he was still in 30s in 1827, 1 year before Schubert. The poems written by Müller are in the voice of a young man who, upon seeing his beloved marry another man, sets out on foot in the deepest winter to escape memories of her. His heart is broken and his life is a torment of memories, dreams, and pain. Schubert, Erika's favorite composer, was not treated as first-rank artist in his lifetime because unlike Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven, who were regarded and are still regarded highly because of the concertos and symphonies that they wrote, so Schubert wrote no concertos, and his two greatest symphonies, the eighth and the ninth, were not performed in his lifetime. Also, he rarely made appearance in the concert hall. His music was created rather at home. Here is a performance of Schubert's Loneliness. Let's listen to it. So Klemmer shares his feeling with Erika while referring to Schubert's musical piece. His intention is, as stated in the book, that Erika takes off her personality of teacher and turns herself as an object for him. The place where he meets her, the music school, here Erika is in her element, and he is not able to possess her because he is in element when he is canoeing. The inherent power that Klemmer holds in him is visible when he interprets Erika's rejection of him as her inhibition. At the same time, probably he feels powerless at the conservatory and wishes to take Erika for canoeing, where he is an element, in other words, where he feels the power. There he thinks she will no longer be there, he thinks, she will no longer be hedged in like Sleeping Beauty. She should be a free person, presenting herself to Klemmer, who is fully informed about her secret desires. With all his idea about Erika being free and herself, he is demanding from her to submit to him and his fellow-centric desire. In a sexual encounter between the two, Erika and Klemmer, after a certain point, as Klemmer exudes his power in handling Erika, Erika takes over the situation. She lets him know that if he does not stop, she will leave. She softly repeats her threat several times because her suddenly superior will has a hard time getting through to him and his rutting fury. His mind seems fog-bound with angry intentions. He hesitates, wondering whether he is misunderstood something. Neither in the history of music nor anywhere else is the suitor simply barred from events. This woman has not a spark of submission. After this incident between the two, Erica contradicts whatever she advocated publicly about music in a lesson to Clemmer. She says, in the interpretation of any piece of music, there is a certain point at which precision ends and the imprecision of personal creativity begins. The interpreter no longer serves, he demands. He demands the ultimate from the composer. While not submitting to Clemmer in sexual encounter, rather demanding submission from him and yielding him to submission, Erica breaks free from the phallocentric views on sexuality that conceives female body as object of desire. As a result, she is able to break free from the rules set up for learning and mastering piano and asks Clemmer to go beyond the set boundaries and demand from the composer rather than serving him as a maid. And thereby, Erica attempts to have phallus through piano playing. In the words of Brenda L. Bethman, the piano functions in a manner similar to phallus in that it is the player's intention to the piano that determines her or his sexual position. In other words, the masculine position of concert pianist could be seen as a subject who possesses the phallus, while the feminine display associated with amateur piano playing relates to being the phallus. Though Erica's idea of having phallus gets shattered due to violent entry of her student in her apartment, where he brutally rapes her. After this incident, next day at Clemmer's Institute, she finds him surrounded with young students. They all joke and laugh and then leave the place. Erica witnesses it and then inflicts pain on herself by stabbing on her shoulder. And so she remains outside the normal milieu, as is the characteristic of an artist novel, in which the protagonist and artist does not assimilate in the mainstream and does not adapt to the regular life. And yet the genre of Kunstler Roman gets subverted here, as instead of seeing fullness in everything portrayed, here we see a lack in everything. The novel questions the idea of connecting music to health, happiness. It talks about the pains and ill health of some piano geniuses. It challenges the disembodied aesthetics of the 18th century, which has dominated the piano scene since then until now. It subverts the idea of creating music which is universal, harmonious, and uniting factor on the face of gender and class playing such a dominant role in the society. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arati. That was quite a roller coaster ride, as usual with Jelinek texts through the Klavierspielerin. And I mean, I'm just trying to very briefly summarize, if I can do that, what Arati has just presented to us, which is itself was a, I think, Arati, you have used the word rhizomatic in the context of Jelinek's writing, and perhaps it is also in the fitness of things that your reading also is a rhizomatic reading of Jelinek text. It was very fascinating to go on that journey with you. We've foregrounded the social history of the piano, which is a very interesting aspect of the novel itself. Being appropriate for women, the motionlessness, even clothes being designed in order to to suit that motionlessness. Women having to play in a subdued manner, whereas men could be more masculine, quote unquote, which connects actually to the last part of Erica and Clemmer also, in the way you have shown or juxtaposed piano playing and sexuality in the last section of your presentation. Even the gendering of the piano itself brings to mind the bourgeois morality of the Enlightenment, the time during which this happened actually, and we all have, most of us have also read Emilia Galotti as a play which embodies the bourgeois values, where in fact also the moral superiority of the bourgeoisie, of the learned middle class, and also shades of family honor being in the woman's virtuous body. That itself is a problematic thing about some of the Enlightenment values. You talked also about the fact that Erica's mother tells her never to let her students be better than her. And this is passed on, this kind of repression is passed on by Erica onto her students. And I think it is a point of reflection for many of us who are engaged in a quote unquote teaching profession, as to how far we look at this particular or instances like this. Yeah, so with this attempt at summarizing what Arati has placed before us in terms of a reading of the Klavierspielerin, Shruti, is it okay now to open the floor to a discussion? And do you have a format for the discussion in mind, Shruti?
No, that's it. I mean, thank you so much. And the floor is open for discussion. So we can now start asking our questions and making observations to this lovely, wonderful presentation. Maybe I should start away. I can't stop myself from first complimenting Arati. This is extremely, it was a pleasure listening to you. The in-depth analysis of the text, and especially from a very difficult point of view of music. Yeah, you've actually opened up layers of musicians we would have otherwise not been able to even we would have been scared to even touch upon. At least this is a beginning, and this is a lovely beginning. When you I mean, a very important point I feel, and which was not discussed in our class, was in fact we talked about how music was equated to moral superiority, culture, and that women. But then what we did not discuss in our class last time was that we did not equate this moral superiority only with women's morals, that only women had to be in such a way, in a certain way, in order to be likable, in order to be acceptable in society. And perhaps Elfriede Jelinek was then also opposing this. She was actually writing against this trend. And not just writing, but also she lived this. And hence she was expressing her own subjectivity, her own stamp. And that is extremely important, I feel. And now what was also very interesting, I found, was how you also took the men musicians and then also showed what Erica was actually doing with and interpreting with the traditional nuances of music, and how it was actually sometimes repressive, and in fact mostly repressive, and the normal crowd, the majority, would not even see it as that. Just the fact that we would associate health with music, whereas you just showed us that actually there was a darker side of it, where musicians actually suffered from psychotic melancholia, that the culture of pain and fear was actually being propagated through this music, where the freedom and the freedom to express through sensual love was being repressed again. So this is extremely important. And the three examples that I also kind of understood, and I'm sure Jyots, who is also a student of music, he's a musician, and I'm sure he's really loved this part, would be able to also add to it. But the sonata, for example, and you also showed us the patterns, the crochet patterns there of the complete, the simple pattern, more linear music, whereas in Beethoven's sonata, we had this coupling, and a lot of notes were actually then coming together, and they were set very close by. In Robert Schumann, in the very difficult word that you were finding it difficult to pronounce, the Kreisleriana, we saw that there was a circle. You know, the notes would come from far away, and then they would come down to the do, the high do, and then the low do. And that was the beauty of that. You know, they had a lot of pathos in that. And then, of course, the Einsamkeit of Schubert, that was again a beautiful moment that you showed us, you know, that, and it actually, these had then, you know, connections with the plot, with the psychological makeup of the characters, and how music then actually also helps. Though Elfriede Jelinek is definitely deconstructing these moments. You know, it's very interesting how she writes against this tradition. Yeah, so that, I mean, I could actually go on and on, but this would be maybe first few observations that I made, and I really loved it the way you explained it to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to add up to what you said, like where she talks about the music of sonata, Beethoven sonata, no, and two musicians, two composers, and how she uses knitting, some certain knitting form, and certain crochet form, and it also tells the use of the language, no, because if you remember, there it is said that for a woman, playing piano was a skill. It was not art. It was not something that they were creating. So it was similar to embroidery. So I just connected to that. So she uses those metaphors, those vocabulary. She picks it from there and brings it to. She explains the great pianists using those lines, which you relate to embroidery or hand skills. So that is something, it's brilliant. I find her language simply brilliant. When the more you read, the more maybe you can get more ways of looking at it.
I have a question. As she was a piano teacher, but she had a very disturbed relationship with music, like throughout the book. Even though it's something she would come to regularly, and she would play and practice. For me, it seems like she wasn't really in love with the music she played, and she did it almost forcefully. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, she tells it that she never came to the realization of being herself. It was her mother who was shaping her, and the mother was influenced by the patriarchal notion. Yeah, it was not matriarchal, it was patriarchal. She was representing patriarchy, and she was enforcing the aesthetics of the 18th century on her daughter, which was supposed to be connected to the creations by piano geniuses like Beethoven and all that. So she had that dream for Erika, but Erika, it seems that she was good at playing piano. She knew it very well. She was a professor. You never know, but at a certain moment, somehow you fail into something. That doesn't mean that maybe she was very good at doing it. So, but definitely it's not her choice. It's not her inner call. It's clear from the beginning in the novel that she did not decide it, but she was good at it. Moreover, she also tells that talks about the atmosphere today. No, it's so much competition, so much jealousy, and the element of laughing at others. She herself tells that she laughs at the pupils who are worse than her. So that kind of negativity is around. So how can you create a music of happiness from there? So this is basically what she is talking about. And also, they are always, maybe I don't have music background, so I had to do a lot of study to come up with whatever I shared. So like she talks about this, it just slipped out of my mind. Trying to say, I don't know what was it I was trying to tell.
Okay, let me
just sorry, it slipped out of my mind.
Maybe
I'll come back.
Maybe it will come back to
Yes.
what she was saying. But I think Jyots's question also and Arati's response reminds me also of the fact that, it is not only the fact that the mother is trying to impose 18th century values on the daughter, but I think the entire metaphorical nature of Jelinek's writing also basically tells us how much we have internalized those quote unquote values. I have to say quote unquote values. And the quotation that Arati you also had in one of your slides about the mother wanting to keep on molding the clay and never letting it attain a selfhood, never letting go to.
Yes.
I think these are very, very contemporary insights that Jelinek and all. I mean, her work is a very, very strong critique of contemporary reality. And I think it makes us also look at ourselves in terms of how far we are willing to, just as I said about the point about the teachers, what she imbibes from her mother, she tries to also repress her students and never allowing the students to become better than her, what the mother has told her. I mean, I think it's a very sharp swipe, if I may say so, that Jelinek takes at the academic profession as well. And so even this entire thing about keeping on molding the clay and not letting it go is also very, very important metaphorical insight into our own mindset as such. I don't know whether you got back what you had forgotten or whether this has led you further astray.
Oh yes, okay, it came and again it's gone. Yeah, I think yes, I was trying to say that the teacher also, it tells that it's also critique on the music schools, that there they have to strictly follow the rule book. Yeah. So they're like, there is so much about precision. So that's what she tells, that she breaks free from that, and she tells her student, Clemmer, very ironical that she is telling that to Clemmer, that you go beyond the masters. You don't serve them. You demand from the composers, great composers. So like, I think it's also a critique of how the musical scene is today, how the institutions, how they function, the rivalry and the negativity, everything. And yes, that's what I wanted to say.
I also had a question. I think one thing that I learned by reading this novel was how relationships with your parents can affect other relationships with people as you grow up. And I think this is very clearly depicted in the book. So one question which I was always wondering about is how can one free themselves from this trauma that you have as a child, or throughout your childhood? Will this trauma always stay with you, or will this linger throughout your relationships with other people? I think it's very clearly shown with Erica in her teaching style towards the students, and also her relationship with Clemmer.
I think it's not a trauma, it's her life. It's not trauma. Because she has also, like how Milind just said, she has we all have internalized value system. Same way Erica had internalized to a large extent what her mother asked her, demanded from her. So it's not a trauma, it's her personality, it's her person. That is what she is. So she's in an interview also, she was asked about the character Erica, whether she is a schizophrenic or what, and she said no, maybe she is little bit what term exactly she used, she is nervous, that kind of, but she's not a crazy woman. And it's not a trauma because, you know, when Clemmer is following her, you have read the novel, when Clemmer is following her, constantly she wants to go and longs to be with her mother. And so that they can talk together and they can chit chat and watch their favorite music TV program. So they have made a cocoon and they live in that. And because they don't even mingle with anyone else, no. So it's like twosome. Yeah, that's how I see it. I don't see it as a traumatic. She's not a traumatic person. She is what she is. But she is not a product of what I'm trying to say, that she's not just the product of what her mother is, what her immediate surrounding is. She's also the product of this whole evolution of how we have come to where we are today. That's why I spoke about the social evolution of piano, because she is a different kind of personality. She is not the one who can just submit. So, but the whole system, the tradition is that which demands from her to act in certain way, and she cannot come to terms with that.
Yeah, Madhu, please go ahead.
Thank you, Milind. Thank you, Arati. That was absolutely delightful to hear Jelinek from another point of view. I mean, especially Klavierspielerin, one just carries on and on and on about, well, you know, what perspective that we always read Klavierspielerin for. And this time you took the clavier a little more seriously, and I think that was absolutely fantastic. So coming to this question, I just wanted to come back to what the question was just asked of you about trauma. I think the problem is, actually speaking, this trauma has become such a terribly popular term today that we tend to look at everything in terms of traumatic relationships, how the mothers are not, because certainly she is a person, we may not want to say she's traumatized, but she's certainly, because she's so molded by what her mother has told her, and she doesn't have the liberty, she does not allow herself the liberty to do something else. So everything is always aus trots, you know, I mean, in a sense of hatred towards her mother, that she does these peep shows, all these other things, or buys clothes, and then they have that incredible fight between the two of them over the dress, no? Where she actually pulls out her mother's hair as well. I mean, it's such a mad scene, if you know. I mean, there are plenty of mad scenes in the book, but that was such a crazy scene, and yet they sleep in the same bed, and yet they do everything together. So all these things, obviously she is somebody who is, in today's jargon, someone who's pretty traumatized. No? But what we tend to forget is that the mother is also traumatized. And that's where, Arati, what you were saying is what I would believe in, that everyone has internalized everything to such an extent that even though you mentioned this, you quoted it, and Milind mentioned about the clay business. I mean, what Jelinek really does with that clay is she's taken a cliche that, you know, the way parents mold their children has always been seen positively. And that clay is a cliche. She always turns the cliches on their head, Jelinek. And I think that's what's so delightful about how she works with language, really, that she turns every single cliche on the head, you know, because the molding also, what she's done with the molding, as it were, you know. So just no question, but just I really liked it, and I can only say congratulations that you made the effort to understand music.
Yes, in fact, I came across one article where it was like about the somebody has written a piece about some particular work. Maybe this one, or she has used music in several works. No, so musically, try to understand it musically. I just looked at it. I said, this is not my cup of tea. So I moved to the social aspect of it. I was like, okay, I will not understand the note. So people are doing even that in relation to Elfriede Jelinek's work. Like this aspect is being taken seriously now, that there is a lot of music in her.
How to understand her rhythms, because those
Rhythms,
novels,
yeah.
especially those three big novels, Gear, Lust and all, had to be read that way, because where were the characters, where were the figures? There was nothing there, you know. You just had to read it in the rhythm. I think that was also one of the aspects of trying to understand Jelinek, no? Anyway.
Thank you, Madhu.
May I please continue with where you left when you said she's not a crazy woman, because that's precisely where, you know, our discussion actually in class actually took off, and we were trying to understand where exactly the difference lies between being crazy and being, well, an artist. In this case, yes. I would like to put it like that, you know, because she is definitely going against the norm. There are very, let's say, weird, quote unquote, things that she does. We've already accepted it. Why does she inflict injury in the end on her own shoulder when she actually wanted to kind of avenge herself and was not wanted to actually inflict that pain onto Clemmer? I mean, ideally, that would be the normal, the expected course of action, but she kind of inflicts pain on herself. When you say that she's not traumatized, and Madhu has already kind of explained it, and I wanted to maybe add to this, you know, that she was perhaps not a victim. Maybe that's what you wanted to say, that she has not lost agency. She has still kept it. And in spite of having an overbearing mother, the mother-daughter relationship does play an important role. In fact, Ananya, who is absent today, you know, she and Jyots, both of you, and she made that point where she said, you know, the kind of relation that she has with her mother, she actually ends up mimicking it in her relation with Clemmer. So there's a certain, so when we talk about art, there is also mimesis. And how do you see these points, you know? So this is very interesting. So the first point would be, why does she inflict injury upon herself? And how would you understand it in this context of a Künstlerroman? You did say that, yes, they want to provoke, they want to shock. Yeah, it is never an easy evolution or development of the character. There is arrogance. There's a certain arrogance. Would you see it as an act of arrogance there? And secondly, as I said, there is a relation, there is, as Ashwath wanted to also say, maybe there is a relation between the mother-daughter relationship and the daughter or the woman and lover relation, for example. So these were the 2 points, if you could cover them, please. Thank you so much.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to say that I feel that whenever she is talking about, she tells that I identify with these composers, and then she talks about how they were suffering. So there is an element of suffering, and so in that sense, one way of looking at it could be that nowhere she finds in the social history of piano, a piano genius who has lived long or who has been very healthy. So this is something which she probably tells is how it is, one way of looking at it. Second thing is that if you remember from reading the novel, that she is, after she had a bad encounters, these two, Clemmer and her, in the bathroom or somewhere in janitor room in the conservatory, she is coming back home after telling him that he should go for imprecision and all that. And he is mad because he feels humiliated and he is following her. And in that sequence, it is said that she is not able to sense him. He just behind her and she doesn't sense him. Her life is more in fantasy than in her body. She doesn't sense it. And whenever she is like alone in the bathroom with razor, cutting herself and all that, there also in description, you will see that she does it in a way, she knows how to do it very clinically. She does it in a way that she cannot, she maybe she's not able to feel. So she feels herself doing that. I haven't researched a lot, so I did not go into that part, but whatever little I have read, I see it that way. So maybe here she saw, and whereas Clemmer is a normal, he's described as a normal mainstream boy who is good at many things, and he is in a way healthy in thoughts and whatever. But he has the other side that I talked about in the presentation, that how much patriarchal notion supports his overconfidence and arrogance that he has. But in if you scale him, normally he seems to be a normal person. So the like the youngsters, they are talking to each other and they can feel each other, they can laugh and all, but she probably is not able to feel the same way. So I see her doing that as an act of trying to feel herself. That's how I see it. But I haven't gone much. I think it needs more reading and more study. And a lot of people have done it. So that's why I did not go into this area. Sadomasochistic aspect of desire. So I think we have to go more into this to understand it.
Can I just add very briefly on to the entire discussion on trauma? I think Ashwath's question, I think, still hangs in the air, so to say. And Madhu did point to it, and so did Shruti. So the thing is that there is a there is definitely trauma, and one of the things that came to mind when Ashwath asked the question is also the fact that Jelinek's writing is also influenced by Heiner Müller's post-dramatic theater, first of all. And in a sense, if we go back to somebody like a Bertolt Brecht, and for Brecht we have a formel, we have a this thing for Brecht that he portrays social questions, and he asks the audience to go out with questions in their mind and look for answers. Okay, that is, I mean, der Vorhang zu und alle Fragen offen, the curtain closed and all questions open. That is a Brechtian cliche, quote unquote. But I think with Jelinek, it is in fact, even as became clear in the wake of Ashwath's question, in Jelinek, actually the question itself is totally up to the reader. I mean, what question to ask? She is not going to tell you that this is the problem of society. She's not telling that. She will portray it as she processes it, and it is up to the reader, and that's why the reading has to be on the reader's terms, that it is up to the reader to even ask the question. And in my view, if you ask the question in this novel or in even other writings of hers about trauma, then the asking of the question itself is a beginning, that you sense that this entire thing that we have imbibed over centuries, as Adorno says, we have to have tradition in you to hate it properly. So what we have imbibed over the centuries, that there is a trauma element, there is an element of repression already inscribed into it. If I begin to even sense that through Jelinek's writing, then I think I'm responding to a very important feature and a very important line of questioning that Jelinek implicitly has in mind. And the second point, like Arati did, I have also now forgotten what my second point was, but I'll come back to it later. But if there are other observations and questions, please.
I just want to add to what Milind you just said, in very specifically in the context of the novel, we can also see at the trauma like related to Erika's father, no? Like he, if I just want to make, please correct me if I have forgotten it. He's also in the novel mentioned that he had the first, he suffered under fascism. Does it tell in the novel? Erika's father? No. Okay, so that is from her own personal story, but I don't think we can connect the two story then, because yeah, that relates to fascism and the traumatic experience that the person has. So here it's not mentioned in the novel. So I don't have to add anything to it. But it's a very, it's a very useful reflection. And I'm also thinking about this aspect of trauma in her writing now.
No, at the root of this traumatic experience for Jelinek also is the inequality in relationships among human beings. And one of the features of her, she says also the impossibility of forging larger solidarities among people. I mean, that is one of the disappointments or one of the disillusionments that she has shared on a couple of occasions at least, of not having a sense of equality in relationships across the gender spectrum, across the racial spectrum, and everything else, and through that equality, forging larger solidarities among people. That is one of the, or it could be perceived as at the root of the trauma.
If I may, Arati, what you just said about whether in the novel the father's experience with fascism come up, I don't think that is only the important. The important thing is for Jelinek, fascism, I mean, we can't forget the Ausgesperrten, that novel that she writes as one of her earlier novels too. Fascism exists in society and very much part of this capitalist structure, which she critiques also in the Klavierspielerin, is that there is underlying fascism to it. So I don't think you should dismiss that, what you just said. It's not just the father's fascism, but the fact that part of patriarchy is fascist relationships. What Milind just said, that the relationships themselves are structured in a society which has certain tendencies, you know. So I think fascism is very much a part of that for Jelinek, you know.
Yeah, I agree to that.
Any of the other students would?
Yeah. Hi. Can I be? Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi. My name is Nilesh. I'm a PhD scholar working with Professor Brahme. Right. So yeah, I'm just going back to this point that you mentioned that I feel curious about, that this idea of genius as it was shaped in the course of sort of, you know, this post-Renaissance till 19th, 20th century, and especially in the canon of the Western classical music, the idea of genius runs much deeper than even in literature. So I'm just curious about what happens to this idea of musical genius, and so many of them, you know, figure, and that's the trope also of this story. So I'm just curious about what happens to this idea of genius, especially considering that most of them have been male. I mean, it's basically a male canon. So that's where my that's my question.
I think the idea of genius, the problem is not with the idea of genius, somebody being genius. The problem is with the idea of also here we see that the like certain piece of music which is like transcending time, and it has come down to present time, and it becomes the main work of body which everyone must follow, which is fine, but does not allow, because maybe those geniuses are not asking for it, but in the present context, the way everything has been structured, it does not allow one to question that. I think it's about that.
I think, Arati, this is a very important point, and it will actually strengthen your argument. If you actually worked on the idea of the genius as well, and how it has been traditionally received, that most geniuses have been men, so to say. Yeah, and that is interesting, and that's precisely what you can actually put. It could be you could put Jelinek vis-a-vis these men, and which you've actually done. So this would actually kind of goes with the argument that you've already made. And perhaps adding the idea and the point of the genius and that discourse on the genius, I think that will strengthen your point.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Definitely, she is trying to dismantle this cult
Yes.
of genius.
Correct. Yes.
From inside, because she is very much. The German romantic tradition is very much there in things that she has imbibed. So
yes.
She knows it. That's
well.
why it's important that she dismantles it from the inside.
Yes.
Or just tries to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arati Kumari, for sharing such insightful thoughts with us, and Dr. Milind Brahme for sharing today's very interesting session. We now move on to the part of today's program where we, the students, shall share all our key takeaways from this thrilling guest lecture series.
Who's going to begin? Pihu, are you going to begin?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So in this section, we wish to focus on the women's question that was posed at the onset of the guest lecture series. In the course of the lectures, we have learned to see the shift in the ways women's identities were defined in the 20th century Germans' women's history. Over to Kushagra.
Good evening, everyone. So we learned that when we say German women's writing, we do not only consider women writers from Germany, but we also include women writers from Austria and Switzerland. The lectures have given us a panoramic view of the various ways in which feminist criticism has attempted to define and redefine women's identities. We learned that women's identities were not restricted to the women's suffrage movement. In fact, that was merely the beginning. At the ground level, the achievement of the ideal of equality between men and women still remains a far-off dream for many. What started off as women's struggle to gain equal rights changed its course over the period of time. The attainment of right to vote, as we saw, did not alter the conditions in which women lived for a long time. Ashwath, would you like to share your takeaways?
Yes, thank you. As part of this course, we understood how feminist writings and criticisms have tried to determine various other ways of defining women's identities that are not imprisoned by gender binaries. Freeing the identities of women from the male gaze has been the aim of recent feminist studies. Over to Anushka.
We saw the example of women taking agency to survive during the wartime emergency situation in A Woman in Berlin by Anonyma. The narrator refused to be a pawn of the overbearing assaults by the Red Army and sought to use her language abilities and survival strategies to live with dignity. Over to you, Pihu.
The Wall by Marlene Haushofer was an account of regaining female subjectivity through recognizing her animal potential. The protagonist saw in the dystopian situation an opportunity of finding and nourishing herself.
The novel Melina by Ingeborg Bachmann showed us the complex ironies behind female subjectivity being entwined with the interiorization of the male gaze. Bachmann also explored the idea of androgyny from the female perspective, Melina standing for the male voice in the women protagonist, and highlighted the amount of pain and agony it entailed to assert oneself as a female. For any form of assertion is by default a male assertion, and hence the female protagonist vanishes into the wall, leaving Melina behind to tackle Ivan. The formulation of female identity through the daughter-father relationship was also explored here. Above all, we also saw how feminine identity can be defined by the spaces that it occupies, the city of Vienna playing an important role in imposing restrictions upon protagonists' understandings of her own being. Over to me.
In the novel Shedding, we saw how Verena Stefan questions the norm of heterosexuality and thereby opens new possibilities of understanding women. We learned to free our perception of women from the prison of gender binaries and were able to appreciate the possibility of femininity arising from a chain of sisterhood and female lovers. Over to George.
And today we see how important it is to deconstruct the traditionally glorified mother-daughter relationship in the formulation of the self-identity. Yelnik shows us the mother-daughter relationship can both be a bond and a bondage. She shows us how an imbalanced mother-daughter relationship can adversely affect by the individual process of the daughter and her relationship with her lover. Yelnik also shows us how art has played an important role in defining the role of women in society and how it is important to question the relationship between music and art. Over to you, Pantu.
So overall, the shows that women's question is far more complex than was considered in the beginning of the 20th century. By acknowledging this, one learns to understand the difficult situations women have found themselves and appreciate the responses to those situations. Back to you, George.
Ashwath will be speaking over here.
Okay. I would now like to invite Dr. Jan Helge Weidemann, DAAD lecturer, University of Delhi, to share his impressions about the guest lecture series.
Thank you so much, all of you, particularly the students, for hosting this particularly wonderful series. I did want to say something rather about the format than now do what you just did, giving an overview, simply because this is not the first series that Shruti has organized. Definitely not during my time here in India, when we already went over philosophy, we went over drama as a teaching tool, and now we went in this year's series over women's writing in the second half, mostly of the 20th century. It is so important to do these kinds of series because it breaks open a particularly problematic area in Indian universities, namely the compartmentalization, both of German departments and other departments, but in particular in terms of the regions. Just looking at this particular lecture series, we had I had to write it down: Mumbai, Tezpur, Hyderabad, Delhi, Pune, Vellore today. I mean, it is regionally very broad, and also in terms of how every speaker and host of these events actually contextualized the particular work, the particular author that they looked at from their own perspectives. Also, the short versus long debate, so to speak. If you are at an Indian university, you know exactly what I mean when you look at conferences, when you look at student presentations, when you look at dissertation, vivas, then you have always the feeling of everything being very rushed. And, you know, in our current setting with the media being what it is, and, you know, social media being what it is, this kind of lecture series that we have, that Shruti, I should say, not we, but that Shruti has been doing for several years, is really much more akin to the podcasting format. Yeah, and I say that in a very, very positive way, because this length, simply the length of discussions leads to a depth of analysis, leads to a breadth of the discussions that are just absent in all other settings. And that is something that I value very much. I don't really care for social media. I do prefer podcasts, but I also think that this format in academia is something that is just absolutely necessary and doesn't happen enough. The student engagement that you actually saw this series, but also in the previous years, is just, it makes it clear that we are not doing this just for our colleagues to get together and to meet and to exchange ideas, as important as that is, but we're actually doing this, and all of us are doing it for the future colleagues that we will have one day, and that we want to inspire and get off the streets, as it were, at a very young age. Let me also say that I just finished a course on Kleist's prose writings. And of course, this reminds me of his essay on the gradual construction of speech, where it is absolutely akin to what we are doing here, that we do these things in order to actually find out what we think about a particular subject through the discussion of it, and not just for the sake of, presenting somewhere, as is so often the case when it is either for qualification or whether it's for a conference, but we're actually doing it to find out what we want to get at. Yeah, and the students are not just a sounding board or whatever, but it is really through these discussions that we get to know what we want to achieve. Lastly, the DAAD is very, very happy to keep encouraging this particular form of exchange, to keep funding this kind of series, and bring departments together, bring students from various universities together, bring regionally diverse colleagues back together, because this is something I think that, again, we don't see anywhere else in German studies in India. And so this is why it's also super important for everybody in India working for the DAAD and working also in the office of the DAAD, not just for us lecturers. So let me finally say thank you so much, Shruti, for organizing all of this. Thank you for also preparing the students to actually engage with these texts in a way that I also have not seen, in any other context here, by really reading everything, discussing everything, and then after or during these talks actually arrive at much more than what you have done in class by simply being part of this exchange. There's an exchange somewhere in the DAAD's English name. So this is something that we value very, 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 very much. On this particular series, I mean, again, the breadth of topics that were under discussion, we just want to continue this for as long as humanly possible. So thanks again also particularly for the student hosts who prepared so well and gave us also context from the student perspectives on these texts, because these are again not secondary, but they are simply as primary as all other readers' perspectives on this. Back over to either Ashwat or Jyots. Thank you so much.
I would like to request other members here from the audience who have been part of the series, who have given talks and interacted with the students and on this forum, to also maybe leave us a feedback. Would you like to maybe share your experience, just as Jan Helge did? It would be great.
Can I say something, Shruti?
Of course, Milind, please.
I am very, very happy that Jan Helge mentioned the length of these lectures. I think that is very, very important, and it is extremely frustrating to have 15 and 20-minute presentations and then 10-minute question. I think today we saw that it also was very fair to the amount of work Arati has done, that she has that hour to present that. That is very important, and I'm very glad that you have taken this long form in these lectures. And of course, the second part also, which has already been mentioned by Jan Helge, and which is the fact that the students are reading a lot and coming and actually contributing to the discussion and deepening and broadening everyone's understanding of what we have read and what we have not read. So this is really wonderful. I'm just glad for the fact that you are allowing speakers to take their time, and thank you very much for that.
Arati, Madhu?
Yes, I also would like to just say the same thing what Milind and Jan Helge said. It's like the word he used, podcast kind of thing. So it's really important to give time for like something to sink in, something to be talked about, and something to sink in. And before that, the kind of background you already have, like it's like together with students, And then it's for the students, and then students are also very involved. That is something which is so much missing. I don't know whether I should complain about these things. I don't know. We have our teachers here too. Maybe they must be thinking similarly about us. But
Thank you so much.
So it's really nice to see them being so involved in it, and there is a kind of interconnectivity. So I really like it, like and the way the progression happened, the way we started thematically, and how we came to the topic, today's topic, and at the same time, like the background work that we all do. So, and especially, I must come, it's commendable. The students are really, their involvement is really commendable. But I really am curious. I don't know whether there is any space and time for that. For example, you said Jutes, he has the background in music. And so it makes me very curious because I would have liked if he would have made some comment about that aspect in today's presentation. But yes, what I'm saying that it's also nice that you have students from diverse fields. Somebody is from law, somebody is from some other department. So it would be nice if we do see that also in their reflection of what, like the contribution will be even more meaningful and substantial if their field of knowledge comes to it.
Absolutely. And that's what I always encourage, even in our class discussions. So we do take up a work, and I mean, it's always, we have discussed this work. There are observations from students from the law perspective, students from international relations, then would also take up a point that they have studied somewhere. It is very interesting, these discussions, and it actually ensures a very, very diverse discussion and a very enriching discussion and atmosphere. We talked about psychological observations. Students from psychology, for example, they also had their ideas about why is she really neurotic? Is she really, are we talking about clinical madness here? So, and how would you deal if you had Erika Kohut as a patient, for example, such things, and whether we should be treating her as a patient or, as we learned from you today, Künstlerin, and in which sense Künstlerin. So yes, thank you so much, Arati. Thank you so much for your observations. Yes.
I think Meher wants something.
Meher, yeah.
Yes, I can only reiterate, Shruti, that the format has been marvelous and I have thoroughly enjoyed. I just could not attend one, but I have enjoyed the other lectures. And it's really commendable. I think it's kudos to you, Shruti, that we at the so-called German Studies Department have not been able to offer this, but you with at your university, where you are more involved in DAAD and where you have a diverse range of courses, that you came up with something so wonderful. So I think it's kudos to you, Shruti. Thank you so much for having initiated this series. And I hope that at some point, you can publish these, because these Indian perspectives are so very important on the international stage. So wishing you all the best and hoping to see more such series from you. I think we have failed miserably as German Studies Department. I can say at least for Mumbai that we never took such initiatives, but that you did it. It's really commendable. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, that's really touching, Mayor. Thank you so much. I can only say thank you and nothing more.
No, I mean it. I mean, we talk big about literature, but we don't do something like this. Whereas, I mean, with whatever, parameters you have brought out something so wonderful. So really kudos to it.
Yeah. I'd like to say, Shruti, and to all your students, I think it was beautifully organized. Shruti, it was a lovely democratic forum, and I think that is really important for me. coming as I do from JNU, where democracy has become a myth, in that sense. But I will not beat ourselves up for not being able to do what you do, Shruti, because we know what the political reality of universities is today. At least what the political reality of the university I come from is today, But I think it was a very, very original and interesting idea to have this string of conversations, because they were really conversations eventually, and have your students ready with them, because you actually got them to read. I think that is actually your biggest achievement, because most of the time, never mind that you give them workbooks and you say, well, you need to read this because the lecture is coming. I've stopped doing that now. I said, forget it. They'll never read it. So what's the point of even giving it, But you actually made that effort to do that. And I think that's absolutely fantastic, because that meant that no one was talking in the air. They were actually talking, having a conversation. That's why I like this, whether you want to call it a podcast or a conversation. I found it very conversationalist. Let's put it that way. And so thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weideman, Dr. Milind, Dr. Arati, Professor Madhusani, Professor Meher, for sharing your impressions on the guest lecture series. I'd like to say all of your contributions have made this guest lecture series a huge success. Now I'd like to invite and welcome Professor Sergio Mera, Center Coordinator of Center for Foreign Languages, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Here I am, unmuting myself. Okay. Yes, indeed, it has been a pleasure to see this series come to fruition in such a spectacular way. It was a series full of very insightful lectures, from which I have learned a lot of new things. And I hope it has been a similarly good experience to all those who participated. And because of that, I do wish to thank all of the participants, beginning with the organizer herself, Professor Shruti Jain, who made this all possible with the help of the Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst of the German Academic Exchange Service. I extend my word of thanks to all the participants, to Dr. Arati Kumari, to Dr. Shivani Parimal, to Professor Madhusani, to Dr. Anupande, to Dr. Pallavi, and to Dr. Meher Bhoot for all those incredibly interesting presentations, talks, and lectures that were so full of new and interesting ideas. Also to the chairman who cooperated in every lecture, to Dr. Milind Brahme, to Dr. Michael Stadler, to Dr. Shruti Jain once more, to Dr. Alexander Phillips, to Dr. Jan Helge Weideman, and to Dr. Christina Rath. And I also extend a similar word of thanks to all the student anchors who helped so much and did so much to make all of this as exciting and as interesting as it has actually been. So my word of thanks also to Ananya Bharadwaja. I have to excuse myself for still being somewhat unused to Indian names. But anyway, to Jyotishwar Singh, to Pitu Chowdhury, to Ashwat Kumar, to Vaishnavi Agarwal, to Pranjal Shori, to Kushagra Singla, and Anushka Verma for the incredible help they provided in this, again, quite eventful and memorable series of guest lectures. Thank you all very much on behalf of the CFL, of the Center for Foreign Languages, and the OEFL, the Office of English and Foreign Languages of the OP Jindal Global University. We hope to see similar events happen in the future. It's very interesting for all those concerned. It is quite an adventure for those who have the privilege of participating in it. Let's hope that similar exchanges and similar series of lectures will keep happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mehra. The ideas that were shared by all the experts gave us a deep insight into the lives and works of German women writers. This brings us to the end of our online guest lecture series on German women's writing. I hope everyone enjoyed the lectures just as much as we did. We once again thank everyone who attended these guest lectures. It has been a great pleasure to be able to participate in this wonderful online lecture series for all of us, and we hope to see you all again. Till then, goodbye.
Okay.
Goodbye, all of you. Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen, yeah.
Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen.